Welcome to another episode of Chax Chat. Join Chad Chelius and me, Dax Castro, where each week we wax poetic about document accessibility topics, tips, and the struggle of remediation and compliance. So sit back, grab your favorite mug of whatever, and let's get started.
Welcome, everyone. Today's podcast is sponsored by Venngage. Venngage is a design platform that is not just about creating stunning visuals, but also about inclusivity and accessibility. Venngage doesn't just simplify your design process, but it takes it up a notch higher with built-in accessibility features. Whether you're looking to run an accessibility check on your designs or export them in the PDF UA format, Venngage has you covered. So head on over to venngage.com, that's VENNGAGE.com, and check them out. My name is Chad Chelius. I'm an Adobe certified instructor and one of the accessibility wizards at Chax Training and Consulting.
And my name is Dax Castro. I am the other accessibility wizard at Chax Training and Consulting. And Chad and I are both certified as accessible document specialists. And if you'd like your certification, to head on over to accessibilityassociation.org and get your certification. One thing to remember is that all of the training courses for Chax Training and Consulting fall under your continuing accessibility education credits. They call them CAEC, C-A-E-C. Education credits, CAECs. So just know that if you've got to update your certification every 3 years, and you've got to keep track of the credits that you've taken to keep up on what's going on. And our classes qualify for 3 hours, three CAEC credits.
Yes,
and if you see us at a conference, also qualifies. So all good stuff, man.
Yep.
All good stuff.
All good stuff.
Yeah. Koi talk, man. We got to talk about koi talk. I just cannot wait for my koi to get here. I am so excited. I know we've mentioned this on the podcast, but I went to Japan for 10 days and was able to go to Niigata, which is the birthplace of koi, and a place called Ojiya. And in the hills, it was so snowy and amazing. I got to sit in a hot tub on my deck overlooking the valley, and it was just covered in snow, and there was one of those red torii gates off in the distance. And then I got into a car. We drove a short way to a koi farm where they have these big giant indoor tanks, and I was able to pick some koi. And I'm itching, Chad. I cannot wait for those guys to get here.
Was that like near Mount Fuji?
No,
there was
Fuji's
snow?
quite a ways away. So Ojiya, Fuji is kind of by Kyoto. It's kind of off in the distance of Kyoto. And so Ojiya is kind of in the northeastern region. So it's kind of almost close to the other coast on the other side. And
you must have been pretty high elevation.
Yeah. It's because it was funny. We're riding the train there. You start in Tokyo, and then we're riding the high-speed rail, and you keep going, and all these big city turned into kind of more rural city, and then more rural, and all of a sudden it's country, and then you go through this tunnel, and you come out the other side. It's freaking snow. It's like from one to the other, boom, and then you're like, wow, this is a lot of snow. And we get up there, and you get to the station in Niigata Station, and you get off, and you're like, wow, this is a whole new thing. And then they came and picked us up straight from the station and drove us to do the koi tours. And you're winding through these mountains, and it's so cool because there's this mist everywhere. Here in California, it's so dry. There's no humidity. Oh, yeah. When there's snow, it's just snow. And there's all these mists and clouds, and it's just so ethereal. It was very, very cool.
Very cool. Very cool.
Yeah. Anyway, so still can't wait. Can't wait to go back. I'm going to go back next November, not this November, but next November,
2026.
Yes, to actually take the koi from the ponds that they spend all summer in back into the houses for winter. So it's kind of a migration assisted by humans to get them from the pond back into the house. So,
wow,
good stuff. So today we want to talk about I don't know the right way to say it. The problems and challenges, and considerations when designing content with Excel.
So the first challenge is.
So what was that?
My cat brought a chipmunk in the house again.
Oh, shit. No way, dude.
That's what that was. Just give me 1 second.
So Chad's cat is infamous for going out and capturing a chipmunk for a play date. The cat's just having a play date with the chipmunk. And I just hear this high pitch. It's almost like when somebody has a smoke detector where the battery's out, which is like the worst annoying pet peeve I have of mine ever. But yeah, I heard that sound. I'm like, what is that sound?
Well, and you have the most unbelievable hearing of anybody that I know. Like you can pick up audio. I mean, like things that
I have a different
probably
filter.
Yeah. Like you've got really good hearing. So sorry
awesome.
Everybody for that little distraction, but we wanted to talk about, using Excel to create accessible PDF files. And you were talking about, designing in Excel. The first thing to avoid is don't design in Excel, right?
Yeah.
It's just, just the wrong program for the job, right?
Well, and the reason that it's the wrong program for the job is that you can't set any heading level tags in it at all. You can only set the header and footer, which they don't get tagged at all if you export, even using the Acrobat checker. The other thing to consider is that if you have tables inside your content, like on the one sheet, you might have a table at the top, couple of rows, and then another table at the bottom. You have to set those as regions and name the table in order to get it to come out right. And even then, Acrobat still doesn't get it right all the time when it comes to trying to export for PDF. So you really kind of have to limit yourself to one table per sheet, and no scope, no span, no ability to even set that.
And I mean, honestly, like, what my recommendation would be is design it in Word.
Sure.
And then just drop the tables in to Word where you want them to go. Right? Yep. Like literally import them from Excel, drop them into Word, and your output will be a lot better.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, that's when you need an accessible PDF. I totally get that an Excel file itself can be the right tool to do data. It is specifically what it's for. But if you've got formulas and other things going on, right? Like, you've got calculations going on, it's going to limit what you can do and where you can do it at. Right. And so when you design a form inside Excel, you are already limiting so many different things. When you design a form, we don't think about the fact that the entire thing, the instructions, the headings, all of the disclaimers, everything is in a table cell. It's in some cell somewhere in the page. And you can only read, well, you can't only read, but you typically read top to bottom, left to right, inside a PDF when you're in a table. And so assistive technology users can use the Control-Alt-Down arrows to go down or over, but they have no idea where any of this content is until they just start moving around and listening to it. So they assume that the content is logical, moving left to right from top to bottom.
Right. So the other challenge with Excel, and I don't really know how to say this, Dax, it's almost like Excel doesn't understand how many cells are in its own table.
Sure.
Because when you export to the PDF format, and I literally just did this yesterday, so it's fresh in my mind, I would go into the table and there were like 30 blank cells in the table.
Well, I can tell you why that is, Chad. I can tell you why.
Please do.
When you do merge cells, when you make merge cells or you hide columns and rows, they still persistently stay there. They don't get exported. So if you look up at your columns bar and you see it go A, B, C, J, you might think, oh, that PDF's going to export with just what I can see. No, it's going to export with a bunch of other stuff that you can't see as well. And so they might come out as hidden blank cells, blank TDs with no content in them, or they might just come out as visual cells, that you weren't expecting. So the idea of really designing so cleanly inside of Excel is really something that you can't afford not to do. It just affects so much of your content. I would love for Excel to give me in Excel, you can assign a region. You can highlight around a table area and say, this is a table. You can even give it a name and tell it this is table 25 or table, income over fiscal year 2025. You can give it a label. I wish you could also do that for text regions so that I can say these 20 cells, these 5 rows are a layout table. They're not a table, just exported as paragraph tags. And then I'll go in and tag it as a H1 or a paragraph or whatever, but at least don't put it in a table.
Yeah, well, and that goes back to you're talking about designing with accessibility in mind, because in one of the Excel spreadsheets I had, they had almost created like a heading for the table, right? But it's in a cell.
Yeah.
And the only way Excel can, keep in mind, Excel is a table program.
Right.
The only thing Excel can output is tables, right? And so I had like headings and subheads and body copy. They all exported in a table cell. And so I had to like deconstruct it. And you're absolutely right. If I could have just selected that region and say, make it a layout table, don't output this as a table, that would be super, super helpful.
Yeah, because then you could just tell it left to right or top to bottom, right?
Sure.
So you could just tell it which order. And this is a function currently of Access Word. In Word, if you have the plugin called Access Word, you can select the table and you can say, hey, and it's not a region of it, but the whole thing. You can take the whole table and say, this is a layout table. And, and then you get a drop down that says, how do you want me to read this? Do you want me to read it top down, left to right, or left to right, top down, or some combination thereof? And you can choose. I think there's 6 or 8 different ways you can interpret that table, but it's great because then it exports it completely accessible as paragraphs or whatever you've tagged them in. It's the only time you can ever knowingly set a heading like an H1 or H2 inside a table, because you know that when it exports, you're going to strip the table away. So for those of you listening who create a lot of table content in this kind of way, if you do it in Word, Access Word is a great program to be able to work inside of. It's just a plugin, and not everybody in your organization needs to have it. Just whoever's doing the exporting needs to have it. So just realize it can be part of your workflow at a really reasonable price point. So,
well, and I think it's worth mentioning too, Dax, that Made to Tag can do that as well.
Oh yeah.
Like if you've got a table that somebody has used, let's just be honest, inappropriately, you could say that's a layout table, and Made to Tag will output that in the PDF as just content, not in the
only
table.
Problem with that though is that it
divs
puts it inside a div.
Divs, yeah.
Puts it inside a div. Why? Why do you
I
put it inside a div?
know.
You know, so but we digress. I mean, that's a little bit of PDF tagging nerdism.
Nerdery.
Right? I mean, we're like, it's a div. How can it be a div? You're like, what the heck? Guys, have a life, get a life. So Excel, heading structure, complex tables, hiding and showing things. The other thing that I was doing yesterday is sometimes people won't think about the page and they design these monster tables. I exported using print to PDF because I didn't want Acrobat to try to get this right and me have to go undo it. But then I did a scale table to fit columns. And then that allowed me to fit kind of everything nicely in an 8.5 by 11. And then I just used auto tag inside Acrobat to give me the first pass. And then I went in and used a combination of common look and some other things to get it the rest of the way. But I think this really goes back to the idea that I know a lot of people are listening. And so far we've mentioned Access Word, Access PDF, common look, and other tools. The reality is if you only have Acrobat to try to do remediation, boy, you are at such a disadvantage of trying to get it done in any kind of timely manner. And I will tell you, trying to edit a complex table just using tags and Acrobat can be just a lot of work. And you find yourself fixing mistakes. You spend 30% of your time just fixing mistakes because you drag something in the wrong area, or you hit delete, or you fix the reading order and now the content pane is, all messed up. So, all of those things, just get some tools, guys. And it's not because we sell the tools. It literally, I if I didn't have any affiliation with any of these companies, I would still be saying the exact same thing. The tools help you get there.
Yeah. And I mean, I listen, I respect everybody's situation, and I know not everybody, everybody's got a budget, and you got limited resources, and you typically have to pick one product, to kind of use. I mean, to be honest, I use them all, right? I mean, I use a combination of tools, and depending on what I'm trying to do, I'm like, ooh, this will be faster in this tool, or this will be faster in that tool. So, and people ask us all the time, like, which is your favorite? And I'm like, I don't really have one. I use them all.
Depends on what I'm doing.
Yeah. It depends on what I have to do. So,
well, it's like, I know you write, for those of you who don't know, Chad's an avid bike rider, cyclist. I know that if I said, what's your favorite tire, right? What's the best tire to put on my bike? I'm going to go buy a bike, Chad. Laugh that one off. I'm going to go buy a bike. And then my butt will be sore for the next 4 months. What tires would you suggest? And your answer is, dude, where are you riding? How much are you riding? What are you willing to spend? All of that. I mean, all of that really, really does make a difference. So,
and that's a good analogy, Dax, right? I mean, that it really is a very similar, situation, because, like I said, I mean, I'm fortunate enough that I can have access to a multitude of tools. You tend to reach for common look probably more often than not, where I reach for common look for specific things that I need to do. And then I might use some of the other tools to do that. But, it really just comes down to what works best for the situation.
Well, if I'm setting cell IDs, I'm not using common look. I'm using Axis PDF, period. Right. Or made to tag if it's a source file. I much prefer doing it in the source file. But if I have to restructure a table, move cells and move columns, like physically restructure it, common look is point and click. You touch the cell column. You can tell it merge cells by row, and it will merge the last 2 cells of every row all the way down every single row in a second. I mean, you can't do that in any other tool, right? You'd have to select each set of cells and hit merge, select them, hit merge, all the way down.
Yeah. Well, my classic example is Adobe InDesign notoriously outputs every footnote with a P tag inside of the note tag, and that's not allowed. With common look, I could say, find a P tag whose parent is a note and level it up. And I've fixed every footnote in my document in about 5 seconds, right?
Sure.
I save it, I close it, I'm done, right? That is amazing, right? Because there's no other tool that can do that I know of, right? So it's just so powerful, Yeah.
So going back to Excel, the other thing that you can't do in Excel, and this goes for anything, is color. This goes for any table. Dealing with color inside a table cell, if you color code your table cells, we see this all the time. You can set ranges. It's called conditional formatting inside Excel, and you can tell it to change a font color or to change a cell style to be a different color or something based on a value or a word, and it'll change it from red to green or blue or whatever you want it to be. None of that exports to a PDF. And honestly, it doesn't matter what program you're in. It will never export to a PDF.
No, that intent is not conveyed in the PDF file, right? So, and you and I always say, like, as designers or even as content creators, you get into this stoplight syndrome where you like to color things as green to indicate positive, red to indicate negative. The big problem with that is that for somebody who's colorblind, they will not be able to differentiate that.
Yep.
But for users of assistive technology, that purpose or whatever green means is not conveyed.
Right.
And to make it convey that is a lot of work. Right.
Well, most of the time, go ahead.
You could technically do it, but it's a lot of work. Go ahead.
Most of the time, like if the number 26, here's a different distinction though. Many times the cell color is just a reinforcement of the number range. So then you don't have to actually tell someone what color it is, because if green is 1 through 50 and 51 through 75 is yellow and 76 through 100 is red, then really the color is just an additional marker for the number range, right?
Agreed.
So in that case, you aren't required to make those colors known.
Well, but this gets to WCAG use of color, right? So now we're talking about WCAG use of color. And I think what's important is like in your explanation, what you just described, elsewhere in the document, you need to let the user know what that range means.
I disagree. So maybe not disagree with the last part of what you said, but if let's say the green is within threshold, right? And that the yellow is moderate risk and red is high risk. You are right. And that somewhere in text, you need to tell them that numbers 1 through 25 are within tolerance, and that 26 through 51 are at risk, and that's
right.
Whatever the next range is at high risk. Yes.
Yep.
But you don't need to disclose the yellow, the blue, the green, yellow, red, because the number itself is the marker. It is it is not the use of color. The secondary marker which satisfies use of color is the number range itself.
But if the color
doesn't convey a separate meaning. The color doesn't convey a separate meaning. It conveys the same meaning as the number. If I said the number 6, you would always know that number is within tolerance regardless of the presentation, because 6 will always be green. 6 can never be red because it's not out of tolerance.
Right. But what I'm saying is, like, you need to explain those tolerances to the user. Right? Like, you need to say 0 to 25 is low risk, right. 26 to 74 is medium risk, and 75 to 100 is high risk, right? So
right, but
yeah.
But you don't need to explain that it's red, green, or yellow. That the color is inconsequential at that point. It's just about the number itself. For conversation, you might consider saying that it's red, yellow, or green, because if I'm having a group discussion and someone says, well, that number is green, someone might be like, what do you mean it's green? It's 6.
Right. But like in that example that you explained, if there's like a legend that has a box of green that says green equals medium risk, yellow equals low risk, and red equals high risk.
Right.
That's use of color, right? Because now the color has a meaning, and I don't know, as a AT user, I don't know what that means.
Right. But you would, as long as you put the number range in there, you're fine. It doesn't matter.
But I guess what I'm saying is you have to explain the number range to the user.
Well, and I think we're saying the same thing here, Chad, is that you would say green is 1 to 25, right. Yellow is 26 to 51, and red is 52 to 100 or whatever it is. As long as you add the numbers there, it doesn't matter what the color is.
But I don't think we'd want to do what you just said. Like, instead of saying green equals, you'd want to say medium risk equals blah, blah,
sure.
Blah, right?
Yeah,
because otherwise then, okay. Yeah, I think we're saying the same thing.
So the idea here, guys, is when there's a range of numbers and not just a color, then you don't have to go in to describe the green. You don't have to make a figure tag or add actual text or do anything complex to make it more accessible. The fact that it has a number in there and you've described what those range thresholds are is enough. When it becomes an issue is when you don't have numbers in the cells and it's just green, yellow, red. Now you have to go in and say low risk, medium risk, high risk, either in alt text or actual text or some way, shape, or form. You've got to be able to describe the value, that color that is there in that cell. And just by coloring it that color, there's no thing that you can do. You'd have to go into the PDF, go into the content panel, find the object that is the fill color for that cell and tag it as a figure. Then go apply actual text or alt text to that figure and drop it into the right cell. That's a lot of work to do for what could be 100 different colored cells. Because the only other way you could do it, well, not the only other way, but another way you could do it is to write the word in that color inside each of the cells, but you're going to not pass a checker because the checker requires color contrast. And when you have yellow text on a white background in a yellow cell, you're going to fail every time.
I mean, you could also write actual text on the number itself and say, 6 is medium risk or low risk or whatever.
But you don't have to do that, Chad. If 6 is medium risk, tell them the legend and leave all your data cells alone.
And I totally agree with you on that. The only thing I'll fight you on a little bit with that is it creates a bit of a cognitive barrier for users. Because now the user's got to remember that number range and create the connection between that range to the number that they're reading.
Right. And I don't disagree with you there in that it definitely would. But if it's not new content for me, if I'm a scientist or I'm a bioengineer or I'm a engineer in general, and that range means something to me, I kind of already have some forethought knowledge versus I'm giving something to someone for the first time and they have no knowledge of the topic. Yeah, I 100% agree that, hey, I'm going to do extra to make sure you understand the content.
Yeah.
All of this to say, guys, color inside cells inside a table. Be prepared to roll up your sleeves because you've got some work to do for sure.
Yeah, there's probably better way. And this goes back to our designing with accessibility in mind, Dax, right? I would encourage, if you have an example like we're describing, I encourage you to go back and reevaluate what you're trying to convey, because there's probably a better way of doing it than how you're currently doing it.
Well, and the way you know is by listening to your document using a screen reader, right? Mm-hmm. Open up NVDA and listen to what's being read, which brings me to my next point, which is symbols inside a table. Ooh. Many times we'll see an up arrow or down arrow next to a figure, a number, and that's a character. Somebody used literally a glyph that is just a keystroke. Usually it's an alt keystroke, like alt 025 or something like that. That inserts that little down arrow. The problem is if they don't use the right font for that down arrow, it may not be voiced as down arrow. It might be just voiced as H or Q or R. And so that you absolutely need to test and make sure that it's saying what you want it to say.
Yeah. I will say your likelihood of it making sense increases if you use an open type font.
Right.
If you use a standard true type font, more than likely it's going to read as H or Q or Y, you know what I mean? Whatever. Right. But an open type font is Unicode based, and every character has a specific slot in the Unicode grid, and it has a position. So it may or may not. I'm not saying it will, but I think you're a little more likely for it to be correct than if it's a true type font.
Well, everybody get out your pen and pencil. You're writing, you're note taking. The up arrow, these are the Unicode symbols for up, down, left, and right. The up arrow is Alt plus 24. So you'd hold down the Alt key and on your number pad type 24 and let go of the Alt key. That's going to insert that up arrow. Alt 25 is the down arrow. Alt 26 is the right arrow, and Alt 27 is the left arrow. That will insert that Unicode symbol into wherever your cursor position is. So just know that regardless of what program you're in, you should always test your document once you've exported it. But those are, in fact, the Unicode symbols that you should be using. If you use something like an emoji for the up or down arrow, because you're like, well, I want it to be green or I want it to be red, good luck with that, because it's probably not going to read correctly inside a PDF document.
Right.
Yeah. So just know.
So one thing that does work in Excel, so if you do end up inserting graphics into a spreadsheet, similar to our previous podcast where we talked about PowerPoint, in Excel, you can click on that graphic and then you can right click and say View Alt Text.
Yep.
And this will allow you to properly describe that graphic, within your Excel spreadsheet. And you can also mark it as decorative if the graphic doesn't have any value.
Well, and I'll give you the pro tip here. Do the first one, apply the alt text to it, and then paste it a million times if you need to. So many times people will copy and paste throughout their chart, and then they'll go back and add the alt text, and they have to, maybe they'll copy and paste the alt text into every arrow, but you could have saved yourself a billion, so much time. Do the first one, right click, go in, edit the alt text, put it in there, and then copy and paste that one into all the cells and save yourself 20 minutes worth of writing alt text.
Oh, I see what you're saying. So like if you have a graphic that's repeated multiple times throughout the spreadsheet, got it. Are you talking about like in a table, like if they use like a check mark to indicate?
It could be, well, a check mark would be a symbol, but if
as long as it's a shape, though.
Yeah, that's true. If you drew the shape,
get it in there as a shape, yeah.
Yeah, but if you had like a square or a circle or a diamond or some other shape that you drew as a symbol to go inside a cell, then you could give that shape the alt text and then copy and paste it, and it will stick across all of them. So, awesome. So a couple of good housekeeping things: name your sheets logically. So sheet 1, sheet 2, sheet 3 doesn't tell me anything. Put a name for those sheets. When you give someone an Excel file as a native Excel file, you want to be able to have a logical name for your sheets. And I hate to say this, but I know that some people give live Excel files as a form. And what they do is they lock all the fields that are the labels, so you can't get into those labels to be able to fill out the form. So let's just say you've got a 2-column form. The first column says name, and then it's got the name, the form field, the blank field that you're supposed to put your name in. If you lock those fields, assistive technology will not read those fields. So when you get into the document, you're just going to get dumped into an empty cell with no ability to hear the word name in the first column. So you have no idea what to put in the form. So while it seems like a good practice to lock to lock columns or rows or cells so that someone can't edit it and they can only put their cursor into the answer fields, a person using assistive technology won't be able to hear what's in that locked cell if you do it that way. So just know that can be a huge barrier. Sometimes people are like, hey, I got this Excel file. It's blank. Can you look at it for me? I open it up. Everything's locked, but all the items in the first column are locked. I'm like, yeah, that's why you can't read anything, because it's locked. And then I go back to the creator. They're like, well, can you talk to the people who gave me this form? And they're like, yeah, that's the way we need to do it. We don't want you to be able to change the labels that we have for the form field. I'm like, well, doing it this way, you are not letting people who use assistive technology actually edit the content. So, or put in, know what's going on, because you can't add a tooltip to a cell.
Correct.
So, Yeah.
So I had just, I don't know if you noticed this, Dax. In Excel, there's a option for ink to math, and it allows you to like draw a math formula, and it converts it to a proper equation.
Huh.
And the reason I bring that up is if you use this again, when you do something like that, you need to add alt text to that equation, because that equation will not be interpreted appropriately by assistive technology. So you're going to have to describe that. When I say you, it's probably somebody else is going to need to describe it.
Right. Sure.
You definitely don't want me to describe it. I'll tell you that.
Yeah, absolutely. Awesome. All right. Great stuff today. Hopefully we haven't dissuaded you from using Excel. Excel's a fine program, but it has its limitations. And when it comes to accessibility, you have to consider some very specific things in how you design. If you're giving someone a live Excel file, it is always best to not only have active rows and columns for the things that have active content. If there are special instructions needed for your Excel file, put that in the A1 cell so that they can hear that stuff exactly when they come into the file. Hey, this document contains a table on every sheet, and you have this and you have that, kind of like a summary of what's going on, right? Give them those instructions and then put your table and everything else inside regions inside that content. So we have a checklist for Excel that we don't often give out, but maybe I think we'll put it. No, I'm going to hold on to it. So if you want that Excel tip sheet, find me on LinkedIn and give me a message and say, hey, I'd love to get that Excel tip sheet, and we will send that off to you. I will make sure you get that. I don't want to offer it as a free download because it's something we've worked pretty hard for to come up with. And it's definitely a little in the weeds, but it will definitely help you make more accessible Excel files.
Right. And if you ask for it, you'll still get it. So
yeah,
very cool.
Exactly. You just got to, we just got to know there are people out there listening, Chad. Sometimes you and I, we're sitting here talking like, is anybody actually listening? Right. Underwater basket weaving 101. I mean,
for sure.
Yeah.
All right, guys. Well, once again, we want to thank Venngage for being the sponsor of today's podcast. Venngage is a design platform that's not just about creating stunning visuals, but also about inclusivity and accessibility. So head on over to venngage.com and check them out. My name is Chad Chelius.
And my name is Chax Castro, where every other week we unravel accessibility for you.
Thanks, guys.